Welcome to the cheat sheet video for the Armor SFI. The cheat sheet, as you probably already know, is my way of giving you a quick reference for tactics so that while you're flying you can quickly understand what's best for each situation. So the idea is that you print out the cheat sheet and you keep it beside you. Don't Alt-Tab and try to look at it somewhere else. Just keep it beside you at all times so that you can easily just look at it and find whatever ship you happen to be engaging or wanting to engage and decide based on that how you should engage, if you should engage, all those different questions. So the first layer of the cheat sheet is how difficult is a target. So you find the target on the cheat sheet, and if it's in the easy it's green, the moderate it's yellow, and if it's difficult, like if it's a hard target to kill, then it's red. And if it's completely just do not engage, you have very little to no chance of it ever winning against it, that's a do not engage, and that's purple. Now the hard targets aren't just hard, they're mostly you should not engage them. Most of the targets that you really have a good chance of beating are in the moderate or easy. The hard targets like the Ishtar, I mean, that's a very hard target to kill. You would have to drop all of his drones pretty fast to have any chance of taking him down, and you'd have to make sure you were faster than him as well. It's a tough target. So let's go over all the tactics real quick. But basically what you would do is you would find it, you'd see if it's green or yellow or red or purple, and say, okay, well I shouldn't engage, and if I should, then maybe I should engage with this tactic. So let's go through the tactics real quick to give you an overview so you understand what I mean by each of the tactics. Now you can see here for all the T1 frigates, T2 frigates, except for the Sentinel, T1 destroyers, that means Tier 1 and Tier 2 destroyers, and all the Tech 2 destroyers, all those have the same tactics. And that's because they're all basically the same ship when you really get down to it as far as you're concerned in the Armor SFI. The exception would be something like the E-War frigates, like a Maulus, the Kitsune, Griffin, carries, that kind of thing that could have a significant impact on you E-War wise. For example, if a Maulus or a Carries were to sensor damp you, or a Griffin or a Kitsune were to ECM you and put you out of the fight that way so you can't lock anything, and then a bunch of other little ships were to kite you and stay outside of your scram range, you're in trouble. You can't shoot back, they can shoot you. You can tank them for quite a while most likely depending on how many there are, but you're in trouble. So with you got to use some caution against the E-War frigs. But other than that, all you want to do is you want to make sure you get in close enough to get the scram. So you probably are going to have to run your micro warp drive, which is great about the dual prop of the Armor SFI. Run that micro warp drive, get in, get the scram, then set your keep at to 3,000. You can widen that to 4,000 or 5,000 if you're having trouble tracking, but 3,000 should give you enough tracking to hit the targets. Load faction ammo based on what the target is. Throughout the whole cheat sheet, if I say load faction ammo, that means load whatever's best for that target. Wherever possible, I told you what to load, but for all T1 frigates, I can't tell you what to load because it varies from race to race. But in general, it depends on shield tank or armor tank. Usually shield tanks you want EM or thermal. Usually armor tanks you want explosive, maybe kinetic. So load your faction ammo, keep at 3,000. Run your afterburner to make sure you maintain that 3,000 range because he might scram you, he might web you, so you want to try to make sure you have that range. And then should you be kited, should they orbit at 20k or something and attack you from that range, switch to barrage, and you probably won't kill them with the barrage, but you'll force them to run away, which gets you out of a bad situation. The stabber, most stabbers will try to kite you. If you ever get a stabber to fight you, period. I don't think they will, but most stabbers will try to kite. Your tactic then is to run, even overload your micro warp drive if needed. Make sure you get in, get the scram, load faction EMP, and approach throughout the fight. And once you have a scram on him, you own him. It's easy, easy, easy kill. So T1 cruisers, except for the thorax. With all the T1 cruisers, what you need to do is, and you need to use caution about the drone boats. Some of those are going to be able to do really good DPS to you despite your tank, despite your small size, despite your afterburner. So and with drone boats, you're probably going to have to kill drones or not engage, but it's situation dependent. So with T1 cruisers, you want to load faction ammo for whatever it is. Set your keep at to between 1 and 3K, depending on how hard it is to track. 1K is probably best because it's going to give you the maximum damage. Run your afterburner, and should you be kited, use your barrage and microwarp drive to either kill or escape. You can use your microwarp drive to try to bounce them into scram range or bounce them out of point range. So that's an escape tactic you can use. In general, all the T1 cruisers are going to be pretty easy to take so long as you think about each one specifically and don't get too overconfident. There are some that are going to have tricky fits. There are some that are going to be bait. There's some that are going to be able to out-tank you. There's some that are going to be able to do tons of DPS to you. So there are certain situations where you're going to have to play it, you're going to have to just judge it by situation by situation. So rookie ships, obviously super easy. Mining barges, really easy. Be careful about the large tank ones that might be bait or might take forever to kill while their fleet comes in. Haulers, also easy if you can catch them. The Sentinel, just like I say in every cheat sheet, the Sentinel's a wild card. It's not that it's such a great ship, it's just that it's an unpredictable ship. Everybody fits it completely different. Some people fit it to stay at range, some people fit it to go in close, some people fit it to newt, some people fit it for just tracking disruptors, some people fit it with shield tanks, some people fit it with an armor tank. It's just across the board crazy. You don't ever know what you're going up against. But in general, you can assume you're going to be neuted, you can assume you're going to be tracking disrupted. And based on those two things, you've got to hope that he's going to tracking disrupt range and not speed. And just charge in with the microwarp drive, get the scram, make sure you get your drones on him, and just hold your scram on him and try to shoot. But the drones are your guaranteed damage. Use your cap boosters to manage your cap because he is going to be neuting you to try to get away. You're much better off fighting a Sentinel in the armor SFI than you are in the nano SFI because your cap booster and tank give you the ability to survive. You can tank him all day as long as you have cap boosters, but eventually you'll run out of cap boosters. So it's very important you charge in and get that scram. If you don't charge in and get the scram, you may be in trouble. Maybe. For the thorax goes into the moderate section because it requires a little bit more advanced tactics. The thorax, what you're going to do is you're going to use a tactic called kiting within scram range. So in general, if you say to someone you're going to kite, that means you're going to stay outside scram and web range. Usually 15 to 30K is about kite range. Some people go further than that to kite. But in general, 15 to 30K is kite range. And in this case, you're actually going to be playing within the scram range, which you'll do in several instances with the armor SFI. So what you're going to do is you're going to assume that the thorax is going to load Caldari Navy antimatter. Almost every thorax you come across is going to have blasters and is going to load Caldari Navy antimatter. That's just a truism of the game because that's the way it is. That doesn't mean it's always the way it is, so watch and be careful for like a railgun thorax, which is probably fail anyway if it's got railguns. But you never know if some good PvPer is going to try some tricky fit or something. But in general, they're going to have blasters. They're going to have Caldari Navy antimatter, and their effective range is going to be about 5K or less, 6K or less at most. So if you set your keep at to 6 or 7 kilometers on a thorax, and you scram him and use your afterburner, you're going to be faster than him. So you're going to be able to dictate the range. Even if he has you scrammed and webbed, your afterburner will make you faster than him so that you can control the range the fight goes down at. So with you dictating the range and forcing the fight to happen at 6 to 7K, you've loaded faction fusion and you've killed the drones first. Now, whether or not to kill the drones first depends a lot on the tank of the thorax you're fighting and the player age. In some cases, you could just go straight for the thorax and kill him before his drones could do anything. But because of the changes they made to the thorax, it actually can fit both awesome DPS and a really nice tank at the same time now. So I would go ahead and kill the drones first if I had time, then switch to the actual thorax itself. But by staying out at 6 or 7K, his blasters will not touch you. They'll scratch, they'll do a little bit of damage, but they'll do maybe 50 DPS damage to you, while his drones will be doing about 150 DPS, which is why killing the drones is so important in this case. You may need to orbit at 6K for a little while to try to get good shots on the drones, but it all depends on how it goes down. The Brutix is very similar to the thorax, except with the Brutix, you're probably going to change your tactics. Now, this doesn't mean for all Brutixes you're going to do this, but in most cases with Brutixes, you can orbit at 500 and you can avoid the tracking of the guns, but that doesn't mean you will always be able to do that. If he webs you and scrams you, then you might be better off going with tactics similar to the thorax, which I didn't put on here, but going ahead and going out to 6 or 7K and using keep at that range to avoid some more of his damage. But most of the time, for most pilots, I'm thinking they're going to fit some heavier guns on the Brutix than the thorax, which means less tracking, and you should be able to get in under that tracking. So obviously kill the drones first, run your afterburner, and if you need a little bit of extra tank, you can overload your afterburner or overload your reps to get a little bit of extra tank while you're finishing off the drones. Air Zoo and Lachesis are the same. If you can get in close, which means you don't want to get scrammed at 20K by an Air Zoo or a Lachesis and then have no micro warp drive, and he's got a micro warp drive, and even though you've got your afterburner and all that, you can't get any closer, so you're forced to use barrage and he's doing more damage to you. You don't want that, so do not let him scram you, or do not even engage if they have a scram. But if you can get in close on an Air Zoo or Lachesis, orbit at 500, scram them, run your afterburner, you'll dictate range on them, even if they have a scram once you're in that close. Once you're in that close and you have mutual scramming, because you have an afterburner and he probably doesn't, you're going to have the ability to control the speed of the fight and have enough speed, hopefully, to avoid his damage. But even if you can't, your tank plus your DPS output should win out over the course of the fight. Load Hail, because Hail has good explosive damage, and Hail has a little bit of extra boost to your damage, and in most cases they're going to be big enough targets to track. If you notice you're having trouble tracking, then Faction Fusion would be the second choice. For the Rapier and the Huggen, same thing. Only engage if you can get in and get the scram. If you get kited, if they have you dual webbed at 20K and you can't get in on them, again, you're screwed. You're out of luck. You have no way to escape, and they're going to kill you slowly, or you hold you long enough for their friends to come. So if you can get in close enough to get a scram, then you'll probably be able to take them should you have them to yourself. So kill the medium drones first, then focus your fire on the target. When I say kill the medium-sized drones, you can probably, if they have a mixture of medium and smalls, you can probably just kill the mediums and ignore the smalls and tank them just fine. So be careful. In some cases they could be difficult, but I think as long as you get that scram on them, you're okay. And instead of running your afterburner, you're running your micro warp drive, because they're not going to have a scram on you, and they're going to have you dual webbed. So your speed when you're dual webbed with your afterburner on is going to be just really rough math here. About 300 meters a second, I would say. 200 or 300 meters a second would be your speed with your afterburner on, which means that he's probably going to have a higher base speed than you, which means he'll still be able to get away slowly if you keep your afterburner running. But if you run your micro warp drive, you'll be going, again, very quick math, probably 600 or 700 meters a second, which will be faster than his base speed, and he will not be able to get away, and you'll be able to keep him right at your optimal and do lots of damage to him and drop him pretty quick. Logistics, as always, yes, theoretically logistics are pretty easy to kill if they're alone. However, they almost never are alone. They're almost always the fleet. The only situation you might see is like a solo scimitar or something sitting out at 20K or not 20k, 50k or 60k away from his fleet, and you may think, well, maybe I can run in there, and while they're focused on another fight, I could run in and gank the logistics off the side of the fight. It's a possibility. It's dangerous, but you know, it's a possibility. If there's more than one logistics on the field, just don't even try. You're not going to be able to break the dual tank of the logistics. And that's a good time to note that the new logistics frigates and cruisers are out there. Those are definite things you should engage, as long as there's not, again, logistics teams. But if you see just like a Tech 1 logistics cruiser sitting off the side of a fight, you can probably take it down pretty quick. So keep that in mind. The Zealot is going to hurt you at range, so be careful of that. But if you micro warp drive in quickly, get the scram, orbit at 500, and then just leave your afterburner off once you have the scram, because once you have the scram, almost no Zealots out there fit a web. Some, I mean, I guess it's possible, but the most popular fits for the Zealot are not going to have a web, which means you can leave your afterburner off, and your base speed versus his base speed is going to be pretty superior, and you could just orbit at 500 with your afterburner off and just shred him. Just use faction fusion and just kill him really, really fast is the tactic there. However, if you are taking a lot of damage, you can turn your afterburner on, and that will reduce the damage that you're taking. It's actually a pretty easy target to Zealot if you get the scram. As long as he keeps you at range, though, he's going to be doing really good damage to you. So you do not want a Zealot to kite you, but you should be faster than most Zealots out there, which means that you should be able to catch him. As always, with every ship, you can test their speed by getting them to chase you and see just how fast they are before you commit to the fight. The Sacrilege is tough. If you go in, get the scram, orbit at 1,000, use phase plasma, you have a good chance to kill him. But if he webs you, now not all sacs fit webs, but some do. I don't know how many, maybe 40, 50% fit the web. If he webs you, then you just need to burn your afterburner and just get out of there. I don't think you're going to be able to win the fight if he webs you. But should he not web you, your afterburner is your best tank in that situation. The faster you move, the less DPS you're going to take from him. You can even overload that afterburner for a few minutes to greatly reduce your incoming DPS while you work through his tank. The Sacrilege will have a very, very good tank, and it will take a while, which is why it's, you know, you've got to be tank stable to kill a Sacrilege, because it's going to take a while. They either fit big buffers or big reps. It's possible for a sac to tank all of your DPS, which means they could tank you forever. That's possible. It's rare to come across, but it's certainly possible. If they fit a dual rep sac, then it's very possible for them to tank all of your DPS so that you can sit there and shoot them forever and never get through their tank. So be careful of that. It's one of those ships that, you know, if you have the opportunity, you probably can engage with little risk as long as you have them to yourself and there's no fleets around or anything like that. So it's worth a shot. The Serb, pretty easy actually. The Serb, but it's going to be hard to catch them. Serbs usually don't just like engage up close. They're usually at long range. But if you see the opportunity, orbit at 1,000, afterburner on, faction EMP, should be relatively easy to kill a Serb. The Vaga and the Munin are the same basically. They're going to hurt you at range. You've got to watch out for newts on both of them. The newt could make your tank a lot harder to maintain, so be very careful about that. But most of them have a pretty flimsy tank overall, just a EHP tank, effective hit points, buffer tank. So once you get in close, you can probably take them down. And it's the same thing. I keep the Cinnaball down and do not engage, but it's the same thing as the Vagabond, really. It's just a little bit harder. So I probably should have the Cinnaball in the hard section for this and not the do not engage. The Cinnaball can fit 2 newts, I think. No, it's just 1. I'm not sure. But either way, Cinnaball has more drones, more damage output, better tank. So it's considerably tougher than the Vaga. But if you get in close, get the scram, orbit 500, afterburner on, you should be able to win the fight. Because your overall DPS versus his DPS, he's probably got a little bit more DPS than you, but you've got about 70% as many hit points as him, but you have a roughly 200 DPS tank that you can run most of the time and probably for the entire fight. And that's make sure you always have enough cap boosters. But if you're running that tank for the entire fight, you're discounting his DPS by 200, which means that over the course of the fight, you should still win. The Deimos is potentially a very, very hard target. The Deimos can do tons and tons of DPS. So I probably, this is almost a hard target to Deimos because you're getting up close on him, which means that there's a very good chance he's going to track you. So if the Deimos tracks you, then he's going to be doing, I don't even know, 500-600 DPS to you. He's going to go through your tank really fast. But what I would do is I would load Hail. I would go in at 500. I would run the Afterburner. If he was getting good hits on me, I would overload the Afterburner. And I would try to tear through him before he tore through me. If he webs you, then you need to get out. Just scram him, heat your Afterburner, overload it, and align to something away from him, and then just burn out of his point range and warp off. Because the Deimos can be very dangerous. Same thing for the Eagle. If you come up against the Blaster Eagle, Blaster Eagle's a little bit easier than the Deimos, but be careful. The main threat with the Deimos, though, is if he gets a web. If he webs, then you probably have no chance of winning that fight. All battle cruisers. Now, that's a pretty big generalization, but in general, most of the battle cruisers you can orbit at 500, run your Afterburner, load faction ammo, and you will be okay. You want to kill the drones first on the ones that have medium drones like the Myrmidon and the Harbinger. It's soon to be, I think they're going to be changing the battle cruisers stats on several of them, and I'll have to maybe update after that. But in general, your biggest threat is drones, which is why you definitely want to kill those first on the ones that have the medium-sized drones. You need to be very careful that you are able to outrun their tracking. On something like a tracking cane, there's a chance that maybe even up close you won't be able to avoid tracking, and you'll still be taking solid damage. Not to mention, on a tracking cane, you'll have 2 newts on you, which is going to make your tank almost ineffective. So you have to be careful about newts in every situation, and you have to be careful about drones. So you're going to have to base it on a case-by-case basis. Tier 3 battle cruisers are very, very easy once you get to scram. Tier 3 battle cruisers have battleship-sized guns, so they can't track you once you get in close. All you have to do is get that scram, use your micro warp drive to shoot in, hopefully don't die on the way in, because it's only going to take 2, maybe 3 shots to kill you as you're coming in. It's very dangerous to shoot in on them, but if you do it right, you should be able to do it, and just take a shot or 2, run your tank, and then once you get in, turn the micro warp drive off, run your Afterburner orbit at 500, load faction ammo, whichever's best for that specific ship, and it should be very, very easy. With the Drake, you want to keep up your speed, so you want to orbit at 2K with the Afterburner on, load faction EMP, and you can alternate the heat on the Afterburner and the reps to boost your tank a little bit here, but the Drake's going to be a tough one. The Drake's one of those that it all depends. I don't want to put the Drake as a hard ship to kill, because I've killed Drakes with frigates before. So, and not even just assault ships. I've killed Drakes with like Tech 1 frigates with like 150 DPS. So you don't want to completely rule it out. The rats will help you sometimes, and sometimes, or a lot of times, when you come across a ratter, he's got a bad fit, and that bad fit will allow you to kill him. It's all battleships. Again, this is a big generalization. Except the Dami. Do not engage the Dami. On all battleships, their weapons are too big to do anything to you for the most part. So orbit at 500, Afterburner on, you'll be just fine. Use your faction ammo. Your main concern with battleships is newts. Maybe drones. You can take those out pretty quick if you need to. The hard ships, the Ishtar, his drones are too much of a pain. Usually fight up close. The Ishtar fights up close between his drones and his blasters or whatever he may have, and they often fit newts as well. I just wouldn't play with Ishtar. Falcon and Rook, It's just not worth it. If they happen to be on field and you want to run them off, try to get your drones on them, because you're not going to be able to do much DPS with your guns in between all the jams. Heavy interdictors are tough because they're going to have really heavy tanks, and it's almost you almost never find a hick out by itself. They're usually with a fleet. Then there's the do not engages, the curse, the pilgrim. They're going to newt you, which kills your tank and allows them to control the fight. Tier 3 cruisers, you just never know what you're up against. Just avoid them. Cinnaball, like I said, it's a possibility, but it could be real tough. Faction cruisers, a lot of those have bonus webs. I don't like bonus newts, not good. And the Dami, which is tough to kill. So that's the basics for the cheat sheet. Remember, it's not a cure-all, 100% accurate thing. It's just based on what the most common fits you're going to run into are. So use your own, investigative ability to look at the ship, judge the speed, what kind of guns they have, all that kind of stuff to make a good choice about whether or not to engage and how you should engage. But it never hurts to take risks and learn from those risks.